September 6th, 1941. Imperial Palace, Tokyo. Late afternoon sunlight slants through paper screens and gilded corridors, falling in wide, thin knives across lacquered tables. The air is thick with cigarette smoke, the breath of men who have learned to mean every hour with policy and posture. Footsteps hiss on tatami. Outside, the city hums. Trams, bicycle bells, the distant rumble of a freight train. Ordinary life grinding on as ministers and generals decide the fate of millions. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stands just inside the doorway of the council chamber, the black braid of his cap tucked under his arm. He is a man whose face betrays both the discipline of a career officer and the exhaustion of constant argument. His uniform is immaculate, gold braid on the shoulders, the double rows of buttons polished to a dull mirror. But there is a tremor in his hand as he reaches for the papers he has carried across continents and decades. Around him sit men he respects and men he fears. Prime Minister Fumimaro Kono, cabinet ministers with stiff collars, army generals with shadowed eyes, and Minister of the Navy Naval Staff, whose clipped phrases hang like bayonets. They are here for counsel. Yamamoto has been summoned to advise. He has been called to speak plainly about the unthinkable, war with the United States. The room smells of ink and boiled tea. A low clock ticks. Outside, the Imperial Gardens smell faintly of autumn leaves. Admiral, Kono says, too loudly for the quiet. We must decide. The Navy's opinion is required. The room leans forward. Yamamoto looks at each man in turn, at the stiff, impatient face of War Minister Hideki Tojo in particular, whose jaw is set like a hammer. Tojo believes in land power and in decisive, immediate blows. Tojo wants options. Tojo wants to be rid of hesitation. Yamamoto opens his folder. There are maps, tiny, precise inked islands, lines that denote range and bearing, technical schematics of carriers and engines, telegrams from overseas posts, a crumpled intelligence summary, and a sheet in English with typed numbers, tonnage, production, shipyards, armament output. Numbers he has seen before in American dockyards. Figures dredged from the public pages of trade journals and from the conversations of diplomats he met while posted in Washington. He knows the scale of American factories. He knows the stubborn arithmetic that will not be argued away. He does not speak softly. If the word cuts the room like a blade, we are ordered to fight, I will obey. I will do what is necessary. We can achieve advantage for a time. Yamamoto's voice is flat, not defiant, but exhausted with truth. He sets his palm on the map at the edge of the Pacific. But a protracted war against the United States is untenable. Their industrial base, their population, their capacity, these are facts, not wishes. We might take territory, we might win battles, but we cannot sustain the resources required to fight them year after year. He shifts the map, points to California in miniature, to the east coast lined with dots that represent shipyards and steelworks. He draws a small circle around a cluster of dots and says, "You cannot match this in raw numbers. Our ships and planes are brilliant. Our pilots are brave. Yet courage does not produce steel. And their factories will replace losses that would break us." Someone, an admiral of colder bearing, chances a rebuttal. "Admiral Yamamoto, you speak of arithmetic, but war is not arithmetic alone. It is surprise and morale and decisive battle. A blow at the enemy's heart." "Decisive battle doctrine," Yamamoto interrupts, and there is a steel in his tone. "That doctrine is a relic. We once defeated an enemy in a single climactic fight. The United States is not Tsarist Russia. Victory will not come from a single engagement. If we plan to bleed them to the point of negotiation, we misread their capacity for production and their political resilience." He lays out timelines, an officer's clockwork. 6 months, a year, then the slow attrition that will favor the larger economy. His famous line, which he has said in many forms to those who will listen, hangs over the table. In the first 6 to 12 months, we may run wild. After that, I have no expectation of success. It is not bravado. It is a forecast, a naval officer's estimation, a calculus of fuel, shipyard throughput, raw materials refineries, and the arithmetic of replacement. The men in the room shift. There are nods from the Navy staff, quiet, private agreement. But across the table, the Army's faces are thin with impatience. For the Army, the war in China has become a horizon of destiny, and the American embargoes bite into that ambition like a bull terrier. National pride, strategic compulsions, and the belief that diplomacy will bend have pushed them beyond the point where Yamamoto's arithmetic can carry the day. Konoe leans forward, fingers steepled. "Admiral," he says, with the weary pleading of a man caught between imperial will and practical failure, "our supply lines are choked. The South has resources, but they will not be given without force. What is your plan if given orders? If the cabinet decides on hostilities, what do you advise next?" Yamamoto looks out the lattice to the gardens, where a gardener trims a bonsai with an exacting, patient hand. He imagines carriers spread like black teeth across the sea, fuel bunkers burning, men marching on islands with the sound of surf and the scream of anti-aircraft. He thinks of the island atolls where logistics become nightmares, and of American factories turning out engines in endless lines. "If ordered," he says, "we will strike where we can strike most effectively. Surprise, a crippling blow to their Pacific fleet if possible. We will use carriers, not battleships, as the decisive instrument. But I warn you, such a blow may grant us time, but it will not break their will. It will only awaken a nation that can outproduce us." There is a silence of men who hear a prophecy none of them want to accept. Yamamoto's warning is a slow-acting toxin, clear, accurate, and ignored by those whose desires are louder than facts. Outside, the sun sinks, and the room's lamps burn golden. Men gather their papers. Footsteps shuffle. The meeting breaks. Decisions will be made in other rooms, with other pressures, with other fears. But in that late afternoon chamber, with the map laid between them and the ink dry on the margins, Yamamoto has done what an officer must. He has told the truth as he understands it. He has written it in memos, said it to colleagues, and even in private letters. He has argued with ministers and with the pride of his nation. The warning sits like a pebble in a river, there, visible, but soon to be swept under by the current. Night settles over Tokyo like a heavy curtain. The palace meeting has ended, but Yamamoto does not return to his quarters. Instead, he walks through the dim corridors of the naval ministry, the soles of his shoes whispering against polished wood. The building is quiet now, clerks dismissed, telegraph keys silent, officers gone to late dinners or tense discussions in private rooms. Only a few lamps burn, glowing pools of amber against the dark. Paper screens cast long, trembling shadows. Yamamoto enters his office, closes the door softly, and removes his cap. The room smells of ink, dusk, and camphor from the old wooden drawers. On his desk lie several folders, intelligent summaries, logistic forecasts, raw tables of steel production that look like something scraped from the bones of an empire. He lights a cigarette, exhales slowly, and pulls a clean sheet of rice paper toward him. This is the moment that will live only in fragments, in whispers, in a document that few will ever truly read. The memo in which he commits his warning to paper, so the truth cannot be talked away, cannot be softened by political desires or military bravado. He writes carefully, not dramatically. His pen strokes are exact, almost naval in discipline, each line arranged like formations on a chart. He writes of American capacity, not rumor, not speculation, but fact. He had lived among them as a naval attaché. He had toured their shipyards, seen assembly lines stretching farther than any dry dock in Japan. He had watched students at Harvard and MIT argue about engineering principles with a confidence that seemed to radiate from an industrial culture brimming with resources.
As he writes, he recalls a conversation in a Washington bar years earlier. A U.S. congressman had laughed over a glass of bourbon and said, "Admiral, the thing about America is simple. If we are slapped, we build a fist. If the fist isn't enough, we build 5. Yamamoto had smiled politely then, but the line had stayed with him, an industrial truth wrapped in a joke. Now, with the empire inching toward war, that truth feels heavier than steel. He writes about oil, about aviation fuel, about merchant shipping tonnage, about the vulnerability of Japanese convoys stretching like lifelines across thousands of miles of contested ocean. He sketches a rough model of attrition, how many tankers lost per month before aircraft production suffers, how many destroyers required to escort them, how many submarines the Americans can deploy within a year. Numbers do not lie, and Yamamoto calculates like a man appraising his own mortality. He writes about morale, Japanese morale, American morale. He has watched Americans get angry. Not angry like politicians in Tokyo, whose anger bends inward, breaks government coalitions, and leads to new cabinets. American anger is different, wide, heavy, industrial. When Americans commit, they commit with factories, with farms, with railroads, with a kind of reckless unity that frightened him even when he walked among them as a guest.
His pen pauses. The office clock ticks softly. A gust of wind rattles the window frame. In the courtyard below, a night guard clears his throat. Yamamoto dips the pen again. Then he writes the line he knows some will hate, the line that wounds military pride. If war with the United States is begun, Japan must be prepared for years of conflict in which the scales will tilt unfavorably. Early tactical victories will not alter the ultimate outcome if the enemy mobilizes fully. He softens nothing. He shields no feelings. He is not writing for applause. He writes because history, in moments of collapse, loves to ask, did no one warn them? And Yamamoto wants the record clear. When the memo is finished, he dries the ink, folds the document, and seals it with a neat press of wax. The seal looks small against the paper, too small for the weight it carries. He places it in a brown envelope marked for senior Navy leadership, though he knows that many who read it will nod, frown, and then proceed to ignore its implications. Some because they fear the army, some because they fear appearing weak, some because they believe destiny favors boldness over caution. But Yamamoto fears something else entirely, that his country is about to provoke an enemy it cannot possibly outrun. He steps out into the corridor, envelope tucked under his arm. The hall is empty except for a single young officer standing watch, Ensign Takeda, who snaps to attention. "Admiral." "Carry on," Yamamoto says softly. He walks past him, down the stairs, into the night air. The city smells of coal smoke and damp stone. Street lamps glow through the mist. A streetcar rumbles by, sparking faintly against its overhead line. In another building, in another room, Army leadership debates timelines and contingency plans. They speak as if war is a storm that will blow over if met with firm resolve. None of them have crossed the American plains. None have walked through Pittsburgh's steel mills. None have heard the roar of a Detroit factory floor. Yamamoto has. That is the burden no one else in the Japanese high command carries. That is the source of his quiet dread. He turns toward his car, the envelope still warm from his hand, the warning still echoing in the empty hallways behind him. He knows this memo will not stop the war. But it is the last honest thing he can put into the bloodstream of an empire rushing toward disaster.
Morning comes with a pale, metallic sky over Tokyo, clouds thin as rice paper, sunlight cold against the tiled roofs. Inside the Naval General Staff Building, officers file into offices with clipped steps, their white gloves tucked neatly beneath their belts. A typist arranges stacks of messages on a lacquered desk. telegraphed reports from Shanghai, Saigon, Truk Lagoon, supply figures, training updates, complaints from captains about fuel allocations. Amidst this bureaucratic tide, an aide places Yamamoto's sealed memo onto a polished conference table. Admiral Osami Nagano, chief of the Naval General Staff, breaks the seal. His fingertips hesitate for only a moment. He has received many documents from Yamamoto, plans, projections, operational schemes. But the weight of this paper feels different. He unfolds it, reads the first lines, and his shoulders stiffen. The room is quiet, except for the distant tapping of typewriters. One by one, other senior admirals enter. They take their seats. A kettle is brought in, green tea is poured. Steam curls upward in pale blue ghosts. The air smells faintly of roasted leaves and worn leather. Nagano reads aloud portions of the memo, his voice steady but edged with fatigue. The United States has the ability to increase naval shipbuilding by a factor unmatched by our present industry. A single decisive engagement cannot ensure negotiation. The enemy's morale tends to harden under attack. Japan's petroleum reserves cannot sustain long conflict without securing southern resources, and even then, convoy losses will outpace replacement. There is a long pause. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome removes his spectacles, polishing them on a sleeve. He writes plainly, he murmurs, and he is not wrong. But others shift uncomfortably. Admiral Takasu, stern and sharp-featured, shakes his head. The Army demands options. They believe American intervention inevitable. If we show hesitation, we concede advantage before the first shot is fired. Fukudome replies, reality is not hesitation. Nagano closes the memo. His face softens, just briefly. Yamamoto thinks in terms of industrial war. And the Army thinks in terms of spiritual war, someone mutters bitterly. But the tension in the room is more than doctrinal. Beneath the uniforms and rigid posture runs something more corrosive, political fear. The Army dominates the government. The Army has already positioned itself to force a decision. Cabinet ministers speak cautiously, fearful of being labeled weak, fearful of being accused of betraying emperor or nation. Many lives and reputations now hinge on one idea, that the war, if begun quickly, can be won quickly. Yamamoto's memo is a knife plunged straight into the heart of that illusion. And illusions, once national, rarely die quietly. Hours later, in a smaller council chamber, Navy leaders discuss the memo again, but this time with whispered tones. They agree Yamamoto's assessment is correct, but dangerous. Dangerous to morale, dangerous to the political balance, dangerous to the path already being paved toward unavoidable conflict. So they bury it in politeness. Nagano folds the memo carefully, almost reverently, and hands it to his secretary. File this with restricted correspondence. It will be considered. Considered. The softest possible grave. Across the city, the Army General Staff drafts proposals for operations in Southeast Asia.
They calculate timetables for striking British Malaya, the Dutch East Indies, the Philippines. They speak the language of opportunity, not limitation. If the enemy is struck simultaneously at all points, if surprise is total, if negotiations follow, they live within a world of conditions. Yamamoto lives within a world of consequences. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister struggles. Kano knows to his bones that war with America is a road paved with fire. He tries to arrange one last summit with Roosevelt. He seeks compromise. He begs the military to consider a temporary withdrawal from parts of China. The army refuses. Their pride is iron. Their logic is a trap of their own making. To withdraw is humiliation. To proceed is necessity. Kano resigns in despair. Into the void steps Hideki Tojo. The moment Tojo becomes prime minister, the path tightens around the empire like a noose. Officers applaud. Hardliners smile behind their hands. Cabinet posts shift like chess pieces. Yamamoto receives the announcement with a quiet, steady expression. He has known for weeks this was coming. The army has placed its own at the helm. Diplomacy is dead. Still, his memo remains on file, a silent warning, a record of truth. In late October, a courier brings him a reply from naval staff. Not criticism, not agreement, simply a directive. Your operational recommendations regarding a first strike will be reviewed by the Combined Fleet Planning Committee. You are to prepare for possible action by early December. A chill runs through him. They heard him. They understood him, and they chose to ignore him anyway. He sets the letter down, staring at it for a long moment, before looking toward the window where autumn winds scatter dry leaves across the courtyard. If the empire will not turn back, then he must do what duty demands. He must prepare the blow he warned against, the one that may buy Japan 6 months of breathing room, maybe 8, but no more. Only one path remains, the path to Pearl Harbor.